You've gathered here today, many of you wearing the glowing badge of empathy, believing it to be a flawless virtue. But allow me to begin with a disruption, because every pure light casts a shadow, and sometimes, that shadow grows strong enough to swallow the one who shines. Empathy, often celebrated, often idealized, can quietly become an unspoken alliance with darkness, especially when it's unconscious. The empath's warm glow, admired by those less in touch with emotion, often hides a silent agreement: I'll carry the pain you refuse to feel, and in return, I'll earn my place in this world. It's not a deal made in words, but in wounds, not signed in ink, but sealed in the quiet blood of emotional overextension. And that agreement, more than any external enemy, is what slowly drains the empath's spirit, feeding the very suffering they long to heal. Think back to when a child first learns to feel, not as a luxury, but as a means of survival. Maybe the home was chaotic. Maybe there was tension no one dared speak of. Maybe a parent was drowning in unprocessed grief. The sensitive child becomes the antenna, tuning into feelings the adults cannot name, shifting their behavior, absorbing the emotional air so that someone else can, finally exhale. In that quiet moment, a contract begins to form. If I carry what you can't handle, maybe you won't fall apart. The child doesn't realize how heavy that burden truly is. They only know that witnessing someone else collapse would be far more terrifying. Years later, that same child, now an empath, walks among friends, lovers, even strangers still living by that silent vow. They call it compassion. They call it service. But Jung might have called it something deeper: identification with the disowned shadow of another. A quiet merging that dissolves the empath's own boundaries, until they're no longer a self, but a screen for other people's projections. I've seen empaths shine like lanterns in pitch-black rooms, and I've seen what follows: how unspoken pain, like moths to a flame, always finds its way to their glow. Even when no one says it aloud, people feel it. Here is someone who will hold my fury, my sorrow, my unfinished suffering. And the empath, bound by a promise they made long ago, receives it all. They open the floodgates of their nervous system, letting the full tide of emotion rush in, and for a moment, the room settles. They mistake that stillness for healing, but it's not healing. It's just emotional relocation. The pain hasn't disappeared. It's simply moved into them. The group feels lighter. The empath is celebrated, and that praise becomes a kind of drug, quietly sealing the other half of the hidden contract. If I suffer on your behalf, you'll let me stay. But beneath the applause, something deeper whispers, a darker clause, hidden in the fine print: one day, what you carry will break you, and those you rescued may never even notice. Still, the psyche doesn't punish, it teaches. And it begins to speak in dreams. Visions of vines strangling the empath, tides of faceless people pulling them under, a serpent they tend to each night, only for it to grow stronger. These aren't nightmares, they're warnings. Messages from the unconscious, whispering, let go of the old contract, or be destroyed by it. But most never hear that message. Instead, they reach for more light, meditation, prayer, acts of service, each one sacred in its own right, until it becomes a way to escape. Because light that refuses to face the dark doesn't illuminate, it blinds. And the empath, tragically, becomes blind to how deeply they're running on empty. I once worked with a nurse who physically felt pain every time one of her patients cried. She believed it was a divine gift. So I asked her, can you follow that gift back to its roots? She paused and spoke of her mother, struck down by depression, a father, absent, a home, echoing with silence. At just 5 years old, she discovered something. If she mirrored her mother's sorrow, her mother would lean in and whisper, you understand me. And that whisper became the reward for carrying a grief far too heavy for her small shoulders. Decades later, that childhood bedroom had been replaced by a hospital ward. But the emotional economy stayed exactly the same. Her body, now fragile under years of carrying sorrow that wasn't hers, began to reveal the truth. There was nothing holy about this contract. When I gently suggested that her tears might be misdirected rage, she recoiled, as if I'd insulted a sacred relic. Rage, she said. That emotion belongs to other people. I was made to care. But it was precisely that buried rage that made her light so irresistible to the dark. Jung taught that whatever we refuse to face within ourselves eventually appears in our lives as fate. And for the empath, the aggression they never expressed, the needs they never voiced, the selfishness they never allowed themselves, all of it gathers in the unconscious, forming a magnetic pull. And that pull draws in the wounded, the demanding, the predatory. The empath calls this compassion, but the shadow calls it compensation. Rescue becomes a transaction, a way to earn tiny scraps of worthiness. And the brighter the smile, the deeper the hunger it hides. Eventually, when exhaustion finally forces them to pull away, guilt comes rushing in like a relentless hound, if you stop carrying their pain, they'll suffer. And just like that, the contract renews itself through shame. The empath mistakes that shame for morality, but in truth, it's archetypal. It's an inner deity, demanding sacrifice to prove worth. So how does one break free from such a pact? Not by dimming the light, but by acknowledging the true cost of shining. Step 1. Obedience to every feeling must give way to dialogue with feeling. When a wave of sorrow approaches, the empath doesn't immediately open the floodgates. Instead, they pause and ask, whose sorrow is this? What are you here to show me? Do you belong inside my body, or are you simply asking to be witnessed? Asking these questions breaks the spell. It turns passive absorption into conscious inquiry. Step 2. The empath must reclaim the power they've projected onto others. If they're always rescuing victims, they must turn inward and find the forgotten victim within, and save that one first. If they fear becoming the abuser, they must stop projecting that fear onto others, and instead, meet the abuser archetype in their own dreams. Face it directly, not in a partner, not in a parent, not in a friend, but in themselves, where it was waiting all along. Only then does the psyche finally see the empath, not as a feeding ground, but as a whole, sovereign being. You might feel uneasy as you hear this. That's the contract stirring, whispering that listening further is betrayal. Let it stir. That discomfort is proof that the contract exists. The ego will protest, but if I stop feeling for them, I'll become selfish. That is the spell. The truth is far more nuanced. When the empath finally withdraws consent for emotional trespassing, something deeper emerges, real compassion. Not the kind that drains and depletes, but the kind that's grounded, sustainable, and clear. The empath can still care for suffering, but they no longer absorb it. Instead, they reflect it back like a clear mirror, inviting the one in pain to take ownership of what is theirs. Some will, many won't. And the empath must learn to accept this limit, because if they don't, the pattern continues. Pain that is swallowed today will simply return tomorrow wearing a different face and weighing even more. There is one final revelation, and it may be the hardest of all to face. The contract isn't just personal, it's ancestral. Many empaths come from long lines of survival, through silence and service. Their nervous systems carry the memory of generational bargains. We will be the sensitive ones, if it helps the tribe survive. To break the contract is to face more than guilt, it's to challenge a deep, inherited loyalty. In dreams, ancestors may appear, weeping, scolding, grieving, but these aren't ghosts. They are symbols of legacy, echoes of what has been unconsciously carried. And the empath must speak. I honor your pain. I see what you endured, but I will not repeat it. Only then does the ancestral shadow begin to loosen its hold. Only then does the empath's light shine freely, not from debt but from truth. Let these words settle gently into you. If they trigger resistance, just slow your breath. That tension, it's the contract trying to tighten its grip. If they bring relief, protect that spark, because relief often calls forth a new kind of responsibility. And this is only the beginning of the path ahead. The night is long, and the unconscious waits patiently. But if you stay, if you dare to look at the hidden claws beneath your glowing kindness, something once impossible begins to happen. Your light will no longer hunger for the dark. It will no longer seek pain to prove its worth. Instead, it will start to transform darkness into light. Listen to the hush that falls when a sacred vow is questioned. In that silence, the shadow listens, waiting to see if you will finally recognize its presence. You, who call yourself empath, do you feel that tremor in your chest right now? That's the contract pulsing, wondering if it still has power over you. Stay with that tremor. Don't rush to smooth it away. Let it speak, because beneath its trembling lies a voice you've never fully allowed to speak. The voice that says, I'm tired of being made holy by disappearing. There's a dream I've heard in many forms. A lone traveler walks into a candlelit chapel. At the altar, a radiant chalice gleams in the dark. Etched into its rim are the words, drink, and they shall be healed. The traveler lifts the cup, and with each sip, their own blood fills it, slowly, steadily, until the chalice overflows, and their body turns pale, translucent. They wake up gasping, not from fear of God, but from the quiet terror of betraying themselves. Because what kind of divinity asks you to disappear so someone else can be whole? Only the false god of the old contract. To break that illusion, you must perform a sacred act of rebellion. You must place your own soul on the altar, and refuse to sacrifice it. The first time you do this, it will feel like blasphemy. You'll hear the voice in your head whisper, how selfish. You'll hear the echoes of family ask, who do you think you are? You might even feel sick to your stomach, because your body, trained for years to uphold the contract, will resist as that old psychic grip begins to loosen. Breathe. Nausea is not a sign that you've done something wrong. It's the body detoxing from an old truth. Now let's talk about anger, because it's the fire that forges new agreements. Empaths tend to fear anger, The way a moth fears an open flame. And for good reason. They've been burned before. Maybe in childhood, anger showed up as violence. Maybe it was unpredictable, humiliating, or unsafe. And so, the nervous system made a vow: we will never generate that kind of heat. So the furnace was sealed shut. But a sealed furnace doesn't make things safer. It just builds pressure. That pressure escapes in whispers, passive aggression, migraines, silent despair. The old contract murmurs, better to harm yourself quietly than risk hurting someone else. But that's a lie, because real anger, when met with awareness, isn't violence. It's a boundary, come alive. It's the psyche standing up and saying, I exist and this line matters. Start small. The next time you feel that subtle intrusion, the message that demands immediate comfort, the friend who pours out their pain while never asking about yours, the family dynamic that forever casts you as the healer, pause. Feel that flicker, that faint ember of irritation glowing in your gut. Instead of smothering it with instant empathy, ask it, what are you trying to protect? At first, there may be only silence. That ember has been quiet for a long time, but if you stay with it, a word will rise. Time, rest, dignity, space. Then, speak that need, clearly and simply. A sentence like, I know this is hard. I can be here for 10 minutes, but then I need to take care of myself. Your hands may shake. Your voice might tremble. That's okay. Every tremor is an old link breaking in the chain you've worn for years. Night will come to test you. The contract is clever. It knows your guilt well. It will slip into your dreams showing you the person you set a boundary with, as a weeping child left alone on a doorstep, or paint scenes of chaos, as if disaster came simply because you weren't there to save them. Do not take these dreams at face value. They are not prophecies. They are propaganda from the old contract. Counter them through active imagination. Step into the dream. Walk to that doorstep. Pick up the crying child. Look into their eyes. Often you'll find they are your own, pleading to be rescued. Take that child inside. Offer them food. And make a promise. You will never again have to trade your aliveness for love. This inner healing isn't fantasy. It's symbolic neurosurgery. Soul repair carried out in images and emotion. There's another dream that often follows. As the empath begins to reclaim their power, they may see themselves in brilliant clothing, an emerald green robe, perhaps, radiant and beautiful yet deeply embarrassing. Crowds are watching. The dreamer tries to hide. Symbolically, those garments represent life force, vitality, and charisma, the very essence that was once handed over to others. Now, the psyche is dressing you in your rightful colors. And your discomfort. That's the lingering residue of humility twisted into self-erasure. So, begin wearing color in waking life, literally and metaphorically. Say a desire out loud at the lunch table. Claim a full seat on the train without shrinking. Laugh, without apology, for a full, wild minute. These may seem small, but they are micro-rituals, and ritual is how archetypes step into the body, how the invisible becomes lived. Now we arrive at the most hidden clause of the contract, the empath's secret fear, that if they truly shine, they'll outshine the people they love, and be cast out for it. This fear usually has no words. It was formed long ago, in moments when a caretaker's fragility taught the child to dim their joy. Undoing this spell means returning to that first scene, not to blame, but to unfreeze. In your inner world, revisit that room, where your joy was met with collapse or envy. See the younger version of yourself. Swallow their sparkle like it was dangerous. Now step in as your adult self. Place a gentle hand on that child's back, and say, your light does not harm. Withholding it does. Then invite the image of that caretaker to witness. Watch as you and the child dance, sing, radiate freely. The dream may push back. Try again tomorrow. Repetition rewrites psychic memory. Now, let's speak of love. Because empaths often confuse love with labor. They pour out effort as proof of care. But real intimacy cannot grow in exhaustion. It grows in mutual revealing. When you show up fully, your boundaries, your anger, your laughter, your longing, your messy humanness, some will pull away. Let them. Contracts require co-signers. And when you tear up yours, those who benefited from it will drift. That is grief, but also pruning. And in that cleared space, new relationships can bloom. Ones where your energy circulates instead of bleeds. Here lies the paradox. The stronger your boundaries become, the clearer your intuition grows. When you stop mistaking projection for perception, you begin to sense the deeper truth of others, without drowning in it. I've witnessed empaths, once free of the contract, begin to create art, develop healing practices, step into leadership roles that even they never imagined, because the psyche had always held those gifts, locked in sealed rooms. And once the lock is broken, those gifts pour into the light. But even in that freedom, humility is essential. Reclaimed power can easily tip into inflation. I've healed, therefore I can heal everyone. Be careful. That's the savior archetype, quietly slipping into a new disguise. The test is reciprocity. Ask yourself, does this connection feed both of us? Or does it quietly drain you again, just in a new form, with more spiritual language? If it's the latter, pause. Breathe. Renegotiate. Old ancestral echoes may rise again in this space, because while you break the contract for yourself, you also do it for those who came before, those who couldn't. Dreams may bring figures from your lineage, a grandmother, a great-grandfather, cultural ancestors with faces both grateful and grave. Offer them a truth they were never allowed to speak. I honor what you carried. I choose a different path. And by doing so, I let your story rest. Pour water into the earth. Light a candle. Write a letter and burn it. Because the archetypal realm doesn't want more affirmations. It wants ritual. It wants meaning made flesh.